So Tim is 60, Jill is 58 years old. They were originally planning on working for a couple more years, but through some unforeseen events, they were forced into early retirement through some downsizing here. And so we can see their original plan and working a few more years here had a very high level of confidence here. But when we look at their plan with that new downsizing here, we can see what is projected to happen to their portfolio assets over time. And so even though they're not projected to run out of money, this has a much lower level of confidence than their original plan did. And if we were to have a sideways market or a major market downturn, especially if that happened in early retirement, that would probably leave them in a position where they likely could run out of money. So the first thing we want to do before we even get into any of this discussion about ACA is we want to get this retirement plan a little bit better shape here. So even though they don't have a very high level of confidence, when we look at the column for regular federal income tax, they have adjusted gross income. And that's one of the things we really like about the software that we're using, is to be able to have this granular level of detail. Because if you remember the Affordable Care Act subsidy, that 400% of the federal poverty level is going to be based off of modified adjusted gross income. So adjusted gross income is going to correlate very closely to that. For some people, and the Mitchells don't have this situation, but you might have to add in a few things to that adjusted gross income if you have things like tax-free municipal bond interest or foreign earned income, things like that would maybe make that go up a little bit. The other thing that's going to really matter, two other things. One is how much money they need to spend each year, and that's going to be something that's going to show up on the cash flow report, but also where are you potentially going to pull those assets from. So if you had a whole bunch of money in non-retirement accounts and it was all sitting in a bank account, you could essentially draw that money out every year, and because it's money that's in cash, essentially you wouldn't have to pay any capital gains taxes on that money. You might have to pay interest taxes on the interest income that you earn, but that would be a much different situation. For the Mitchells, they have most of their money in traditional retirement accounts. In fact, many of the people, most of the people probably that we work with, have the majority of their retirement assets in traditional retirement accounts, which means that if you don't have money in those non-retirement accounts, or when that money runs out, you'll almost be forced to take distributions for your living expenses to take them out of traditional retirement accounts, and that could push you up into a higher tax bracket. So we can see for the Mitchells, 2026, they have a very low adjusted gross income because they do have some cash assets, so very little tax due on that. And then in the following year, in 2027, they're at about $85,000. So they're just over where that 400% level is. And remember, it's a cliff. So if you're $1 over, you're not going to get that subsidy. But if there is some inflationary increases between now and 2027, it could be that they still might qualify for an Affordable Care Act subsidy in that 2027 year.